The cargo bay of Nexus Station hummed with its usual symphony of mechanical whirs and distant conversations in a dozen alien languages. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow as he secured the last container of processed titanium ore, the kind of backbreaking work that had become his routine over the past 4 years. At 34, he'd long since accepted that this was his life now, loading and unloading, freight for traders who barely acknowledged his existence, living in a cramped quarters module and watching the stars through reinforced viewports while dreaming of adventures he'd never have. The pay was decent enough, and Nexus Station was as good a place as any for someone with his background. No one asked too many questions about why a former military engineer had ended up working manual labor at a remote trading post. No one cared that his discharge papers carried the weight of decisions he'd rather forget. Here, in the neutral zone between 3 different stellar governments, everyone was running from something got as Marcus finished his shift checklist. A splash of violet caught his eye through the cargo bay's massive windows. The station's main docking ring stretched out before him, a curved horizon of metal and composite materials where ships from across the galaxy came to trade. But it wasn't the usual bustle of merchants and travelers that drew his attention. It was the lone figure, sitting at the very edge of the observation deck, her legs dangling over the safety barrier as she stared out into the void. Even from this distance, Marcus could tell she wasn't human. Her skin held that distinctive violet hue of the Veilthran people, with the characteristic silver markings that traced elegant patterns along her arms and neck. She wore what looked like formal attire, flowing fabrics in deep purples and golds that seemed far too elaborate for the utilitarian environment of the station. But there was something about her posture, the way her shoulders sagged and her head hung low, that spoke of profound sadness. Marcus had seen enough heartbreak in his 34 years to recognize it, regardless of species. Something twisted in his chest as he watched her sit there, utterly alone among the thousands of beings that called Nexus Station home, even temporarily. He shouldn't get involved. That had been his rule since arriving here. Keep your head down, do your job, don't get attached to anyone or anything. The galaxy was full of sob stories, and trying to fix them all was a sure path to disappointment. He'd learned that lesson the hard way during his military service. But as he gathered his tools and prepared to head back to his quarters, Marcus found himself taking a detour toward the observation deck instead. Maybe it was the way the artificial lighting caught the metallic threads in her clothing, or perhaps it was simply that he'd been alone too long himself. Either way, his feet carried him through the maze of corridors and lift tubes until he emerged onto the deck where she sat down up close. She was even more striking than he'd initially thought. Veilthran physiology had always fascinated him from an academic standpoint. Their skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and the silver markings that decorated their bodies told stories of lineage and achievement in patterns that took years to fully develop. This woman's markings were particularly intricate, suggesting she came from a family of some standing. Her face, though unmistakably alien in its angular beauty, conveyed emotions that were universally recognizable. The slight downturn of her lips, the way her luminous amber eyes seemed to focus on something infinitely distant, the defeated slump of her shoulders, all spoke of dreams crushed and hopes abandoned. "Excuse me," Marcus said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you all right?" She turned toward him, and for a moment he was struck speechless by the depth of pain in her gaze. When she spoke, her voice carried the melodic quality typical of her people, but it was tinged with exhaustion. "I am managing human. Thank you for your concern." Her standard was flawless, though accented with the distinctive vowel patterns of the Veilthran language. Marcus settled onto a nearby bench, maintaining a respectful distance, but positioning himself where they could speak comfortably. "Name's Marcus. I work cargo down in Bay 7. Mind if I ask what brings you to this particular spot? It's not exactly a tourist destination. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Tourist destination. No, I suppose it is not. She gestured vaguely at the stars beyond the transparent aluminum barrier. I am waiting for transport back to the Velthran systems, though I am beginning to suspect that no reputable ship will take me. Why's that? She was quiet for so long that Marcus began to think she wouldn't answer. Then, with obvious reluctance, she began to speak. My name is Zelia of House Nethys, from the fourth moon of Valthra Prime. I am ... Wime. I am ... was. To be bonded to a merchant from the inner systems. A marriage arrangement made by our families to strengthen trade relationships. Her hands twisted in the fabric of her robes. When I arrived at Kepler Station 3 days ago, he took one look at me and declared the contract void. Marcus frowned. On what grounds? Age. The single word carried volumes of hurt and humiliation. At 29 cycles, I am considered past optimal bonding age by some of my people's more traditional standards. My intended evidently expected someone younger, despite never having seen my image or inquired about my age during negotiations. 29? Marcus couldn't keep the incredulity out of his voice. That's not old by any reasonable standard. Zelia's amber eyes met his, searching for signs of mockery or pity. Finding neither, she continued. Perhaps not by human standards, but among certain circles of my people, there is pressure to form pair bonds early in life. My family invested significantly in this arrangement. Travel expenses, ceremonial garments, gifts for the merchant's house. Now I am stranded here with barely enough credits for basic sustenance, let alone passage home. The bitterness in her voice was palpable, but beneath it, Marcus heard something else. Shame. She was ashamed of being rejected, ashamed of being a burden to her family, ashamed of not meeting someone else's arbitrary standards. It was a feeling he knew all too. Well, the guy's an idiot, Marcus said bluntly. Age is just a number, and from where I'm sitting, you're hardly ancient. Hell, I'm 34 myself, and nobody's written me off as past my prime. Something flickered in Zelia's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or hope. You truly think so? I know so. Look, I don't know much about Velthran culture, but I know plenty about people who judge others by the wrong criteria. You seem intelligent, articulate, obviously come from a good family judging by those clothes. Any man who'd reject you based solely on age is missing out on something special. For the first time since he'd approached her, Zelia smiled. Just a slight upturn of her lips, but it transformed her entire face. You are kind to say so, Marcus of Bay 7, though I fear my situation remains unchanged. My family's honor has been damaged by this failed arrangement, and I do not know how I will face them. Marcus found himself leaning forward, drawn by something in her manner that spoke to his own experiences with disappointment and rejection. What if you didn't have to go back empty-handed? I do not understand. What if the arrangement wasn't a complete failure? What if you found a different husband? Zelia's eyes widened. There are no other Velthran men on this station suitable for bonding, and I doubt any would be interested in a woman my age regardless. Who said anything about Velthran men? The silence that followed was deafening. Zelia stared at him as if he just suggested she sprout wings and fly to the nearest star. Then, slowly, understanding dawned in her amber eyes. You cannot be serious. Marcus surprised himself by realizing that he was, in fact, completely serious. The idea had formed somewhere in the back of his mind as they talked, crystallizing into something that felt less like impulse and more like inevitability. Here was a woman who'd been cast aside by someone too shallow to see her worth, just as he'd been discarded by a military that valued political expedience over truth. Maybe they could help each other. Why not? He asked, his voice growing more confident with each word. You need a husband to satisfy your family's expectations. I'm available. We're both adults. We're both tired of being alone. And we both deserve better than what we've gotten so far. Zelia's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. Marcus, we have known each other for mere minutes. Marriage is a sacred bond among my people. It is not entered into lightly. Doesn't have to be entered into blindly either. Look, I'm not saying we have to figure out everything right now. But what if we took a chance on each other? What if we tried to build something real out of a practical arrangement? As he spoke, Marcus found himself meaning every word. There was something about Zelia that called to him. Her resilience in the face of rejection, her dignity despite her circumstances, the intelligence that sparked in her eyes as she considered his words. Maybe it was crazy, but he'd done crazier things in his life, and most of them had been for far worse reasons. You would truly consider bonding with someone of another species? Zelia asked quietly. The cultural barriers alone, ... We'll figure it out as we go, Marcus replied. I'm pretty adaptable, and you obviously know standard better than half the humans I work with. Besides, what's the alternative? You go home in disgrace. I stay here moving boxes until I'm too old to lift them. Neither of us gets what we really want. And what is it that you really want, Marcus of Bay 7? The question caught him off guard with its directness. What did he want? For years, he told himself that he just wanted to be left alone, to work his shifts and mind his own business. But sitting here with this remarkable woman, watching the way starlight played across her violet skin, he realized that wasn't true at all. Someone to share this with, he said, gesturing at the vast star field beyond the observation deck. Someone who understands what it's like to be overlooked, to be told you're not good enough. Someone willing to take a chance on building something new. Zelia was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes studying his face as if trying to read his very soul. Finally, she spoke. If we were to consider such an arrangement, there would be complications. Veilthron bonding ceremonies have specific requirements. My family would need to be notified. There would be legal documents to file with both human and Valthran authorities. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. But you're not saying no. I am saying ... double quotes. Zelia paused, then squared her shoulders with visible resolve. I am saying that perhaps the stars have brought us together for a reason. If you are truly willing to take such a risk with a stranger, then perhaps I am as well. Standing up from the bench, Marcus extended his hand toward her. In that case, Zelia of House Nethys, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? She stared at his outstretched hand for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Her skin was warm despite its exotic appearance, and Marcus felt something electric pass between them. Not just physical attraction, but a sense of rightness, as if puzzle pieces were finally clicking into place. Yes, Marcus of Bay 7, she said, and her smile was like sunrise after a long night. I believe I will. The marriage registration office on Nexus Station was exactly what one might expect from a bureaucratic facility on a remote trading post, sterile, efficient, and utterly lacking in romance. Marcus and Zelia sat side by side on uncomfortable metal chairs, waiting for their turn with the automated processing system. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across Zelia's violet features, but even in this clinical environment, she remained breathtakingly beautiful. Are you having second thoughts? Marcus asked quietly, noting how Zelia's hands trembled slightly as she held the preliminary forms they'd been given. Not about you, she replied, her melodic voice barely above a whisper, but about the speed of this decision. In Veilthran culture, bonding ceremonies typically take months to plan. There are rituals, family meetings, exchanges of gifts between houses. What we are doing feels ... rushed. Before Marcus could respond, a cheerful voice interrupted their conversation. Well. Marcus Torres, what in the seven hells are you doing in the marriage bureau? Marcus turned to see Dex approaching, his sandy-haired coworker grinning widely. Dex was one of the few people on the station Marcus genuinely considered a friend, a former freight pilot who'd been grounded after a cargo accident left him with nerve damage in his left hand. Like Marcus, he'd found refuge in the steady work of the docking bays. Dex, Marcus said, standing to greet his friend. What brings you here? Had to file some custody paperwork for my daughter back on Kepler Colony. But that's not important right now. Dex's eyes moved to Zelia, taking in her formal Velthrin attire and the obvious tension in her posture. Introduce me to your companion. Zelia, this is Dex Morrison, my coworker and friend. Dex, meet Zelia of House Nethys. Dex's eyebrows shot up as he processed the formal introduction. House Nethys? As in the Nethys Shipping Consortium? Lady, you're practically royalty. A flush of deeper violet colored Zelia's cheeks. My family does have business interests throughout the sector, yes, though I fear my current circumstances hardly reflect such elevated status. Current circumstances being that she's about to marry me, Marcus said, his voice carrying a hint of defiance. Dex's mouth fell open. Then he began to laugh, not mockingly, but with genuine delight. Marcus, you magnificent bastard. Here I thought you were going to die alone in those cramped quarters, and instead you've managed to sweep a Velthrin noblewoman off her feet. How did this happen? It is complicated, Zelia said carefully. The best love stories usually are. Dex replied, then caught the expression on Marcus's face. This is a love story, right? Please tell me you're not doing this for some practical reason that's going to blow up in both your faces. Marcus and Zelia exchanged glances. The truth was complicated. They barely knew each other, and their decision had been born more from mutual desperation than romance. But there had been something in that moment on the observation deck, a spark of connection that felt genuine. We're taking a chance on each other, Marcus said finally. Sometimes that's how the best relationships start. Dex studied them both for a moment, his expression growing serious. Look, I'm not going to pretend I understand all the cultural implications here, but I've known Marcus for 3 years. He's one of the most decent men I've ever met, loyal, hardworking, and too stubborn for his own good sometimes. If he says he's serious about this, then he is. Thank you, Zelia said softly. That means more than you might realize. Torres party, please report to Processing Station 7. An automated voice announced over the intercom. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with nervousness as they approached the sleek interface terminal. The processing clerk was a holographic construct, a pleasant-faced human woman who flickered, occasionally at the edges. Good afternoon, the clerk said in a synthesized voice. I'm Joran, your automated marriage efficient. I see you're filing for an expedited interspecies bonding. Please place your hands on the biometric scanners so I can verify your identities. Marcus placed his palm on the cool metal surface, feeling the brief tingle of the scanner, reading his genetic markers, retinal patterns, and neural signature. Beside him, Zelia did the same, though her hand shook slightly. Identity confirmed. Marcus Antonio Torres, age 34, human male, citizen of the Terran Colonial Union. Clean legal record. Current employment verified at Nexus Station Cargo Division. The hologram paused as additional data streamed across the display. Identity confirmed. Zelia Nethys Velora, age 29, Velthrin female, citizen of the Velthrin Consortium. Legal status ... Interesting. Is there a problem? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Not a problem, exactly. But there are some unusual circumstances in Lady Zelia's file. It appears she was recently party to a dissolved marriage contract with one Gevern Muldick of Kepler Station. The dissolution was unilateral and filed for inadequate age compatibility. Zelia's shoulders sagged. Even here, in this sterile office, her previous rejection followed her. That has no bearing on this proceeding, Marcus said firmly. We're both free adults, capable of making our own decisions. Of course, Joran replied smoothly. I merely note it for the record. Now, there are several legal considerations for interspecies bonding that I must make you aware of. Vailthran marriage law recognizes only life partnerships. There is no provision for divorce in their legal system. Human law, conversely, allows for dissolution of marriage under various circumstances. Which legal framework would you prefer to operate under? Marcus looked at Zelia, seeing the uncertainty in her amber eyes. This was it, the moment where they either committed fully or backed away. Vailthran law, he said without hesitation. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Zelia's eyes widened with surprise, and something that might have been gratitude. Marcus, you understand what that means? A life bond among my people it is permanent. Even death does not fully sever the connection. I understand, Marcus replied. I'm not interested in an escape clause. Dex, who had been listening quietly from a nearby chair, let out a low whistle. Damn, Marcus. When you commit, you really commit. Very well, Joran continued. Under Vailthran law, I am required to ask if both parties enter this bond freely and with full understanding of its implications. Mr. Torres. I do, Lady Zelia? There was a long pause. Marcus held his breath, suddenly terrified that she might change her mind. Then Zelia straightened her shoulders and spoke with quiet dignity. I do. Excellent. Now, Vailthran tradition requires the exchange of bonding words, personal vows that will be sealed into the legal record. These may be spoken in any language, though standard translation is recommended for legal clarity. Mr. Torres, you may begin. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. He hadn't prepared anything formal, hadn't expected to need wedding vows. But looking at Zelia, at this remarkable woman who had trusted him enough to take this leap, the words came naturally. Zelia, I know we're doing this backwards, getting married first and falling in love later. But I promise you this. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me. I will learn your customs, respect your culture, and do everything in my power to make you happy. You deserve someone who sees your value, not your flaws, and I swear by every star in this galaxy that I will be that person. Tears had begun to gather in Zelia's eyes, making them shimmer like captured nebulae. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite her obvious emotion. Marcus, you have shown me more kindness in one day than I have experienced in months. You saw me at my lowest point and chose to lift me up rather than pass by. I promise to honor the gift you have given me, not just marriage, but hope. I will learn to be the partner you deserve, and I will spend my life proving that your faith in me was not misplaced. Even Dex was wiping at his eyes, though he tried to hide it by pretending to check his cum device. Beautiful, Joran said, and for a moment, her synthetic voice carried surprising warmth. By the authority vested in me by the Nexus Station Administrative Council, and recognized by both the Terran Colonial Union and the Vailthran Consortium, I now pronounce you life partners under Vailthran law. The bond has been registered and sealed. A soft chime sounded, and 2 identical identification cards emerged from a slot in the terminal. Marcus picked them up, noting that both now listed them as married and included updated next of kin information. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Torres, Joran said. May your bond bring you joy across all the years to come. Mrs. Torres. Zelia stared at her new identification card with an expression of wonder, as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. So, Dex said, breaking the moment of stunned silence that had settled over them, what happens now? Are you going to have a reception? Because I know a place on level 7 that serves decent synthetic alcohol and has a view of the shipping lanes. Marcus looked at Zelia questioningly. What do you think? Ready to celebrate? Or would you prefer something quieter? Zelia seemed overwhelmed by the question, by having choices to make about her own life. I have never been to a human celebration before. It might be ... educational. And level 7 it is, Dex declared. But first, we need to do something about the wardrobe situation. No offense, Lady Zelia, but those formal robes are beautiful, but they're going to attract attention. Half the station will think Marcus kidnapped a Velthran princess. I am not a princess. Zelia protested weakly. Close enough, Dex grinned. Come on, there's a clothing vendor on level 3 that caters to mixed species. We'll get you something that says happily married instead of recently abandoned at the altar. 3 weeks into their marriage, Marcus was beginning to understand that learning about Velthran culture was like trying to drink from a fire hose while blindfolded. Every day brought new discoveries about customs, traditions, and social expectations that he had never even imagined existed. The morning harmonics are important, Zelia explained patiently as she demonstrated a series of melodic tones that Velthrans used to greet each new day. It is not merely tradition. The frequencies help align our biorhythms with the local stellar cycle. Marcus attempted to replicate the sounds, producing something that sounded more like a dying engine than a spiritual practice. Zelia's attempt to hide her amusement failed completely, and she dissolved into laughter. Perhaps we should focus on the less musical aspects of Velthran culture for now, she suggested diplomatically. They had settled into a comfortable routine over the past weeks. Marcus continued his work in the cargo bays, while Zelia had found temporary employment with the station's diplomatic services, her noble background and language skills making her invaluable for translation work. In the evenings, they shared meals and stories, slowly building the foundation of friendship that Marcus hoped would eventually grow into something deeper. The physical arrangement in his quarters had evolved naturally. After the first week of Marcus sleeping on the couch, Zelia had quietly suggested they could share the bed as long as they maintained appropriate boundaries. They slept with careful space between them, but Marcus had begun to notice small changes, the way Zelia unconsciously moved closer to him during the night, how she seemed more relaxed when she thought he was asleep. Marcus, I need to tell you something, Zelia said one evening as they prepared dinner together. I received a communication from my homeworld today. Marcus looked up from the synthetic vegetables he was chopping, noting the tension in her voice. Good news or bad news? I am ... uncertain. My grandmother, Elder Thesa, wishes to speak with both of us. She is the matriarch of House Nethes and, well, she is not pleased about the circumstances of our bonding. She wants to speak with me specifically? Yes. She says she must evaluate the human who has bound himself to our bloodline. Zelia's expression was apologetic. I should warn you, grandmother, Thesa is ... formidable. She has been the head of our family for over 2 centuries. Marcus nearly dropped his knife. 2 centuries? How long do Velthrans typically live? Our natural lifespan is roughly 5 times that of humans, Zelia said quietly. It is something we should perhaps discuss, given the permanent nature of our bond. Before Marcus could process the implications of that revelation, their door chimed with an incoming message. Marcus opened the communication panel to find a young man with distinctly familiar features, the same dark hair and brown eyes that Marcus saw in the mirror each morning. Surprise! The young man said cheerfully, Hope you don't mind an unexpected visitor, big brother. Nico? Marcus stared at the screen in shock. What the hell are you doing here? Nice to see you too. I'm catching a transport to the Vega colonies for a new engineering contract, and my route happens to take me through Nexus Station. Thought I'd stop by and see how my hermit brother is doing. Nico's grin faltered slightly as he noticed Zelia in the background. Oh, should I come back later? No, it's... Nico, meet my wife, Zelia. Zelia, this is my younger brother, Nico. Nico's mouth fell open. Your what now? Wife? Since when do you have a wife? And wow, she's gorgeous. And not human. Marcus, what happened to your usual policy of avoiding all meaningful human contact? It is a pleasure to meet you, Nico Torres, Zelia said gracefully, stepping forward. Marcus has spoken of you often. He has? That's actually surprising, since Marcus barely talks about anything personal. But seriously, how did this happen? Last time we spoke, you were perfectly content being a bachelor forever. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. It's complicated. Why don't you come up, and we'll explain over dinner. An hour later, Nico sat at their small table, alternately staring at Zelia in fascination and Marcus in bewilderment as they explained the circumstances of their marriage. So let me get this straight, Nico said, gesturing with his fork. You met 3 weeks ago. She was abandoned by some asshole who thought she was too old, which is insane. By the way, you're stunning, Zelia. And you decided to marry her on the spot? That is an accurate if simplified summary, Zelia replied. And you're both okay with this arrangement? Marcus and Zelia exchanged glances. It was a question they'd been dancing around for weeks, both afraid to voice what they were feeling. We are learning to be okay with it, Marcus said carefully. Learning to be okay with it? Nico laughed. Marcus, I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her. And Zelia, you light up every time he walks into the room. What exactly are you waiting for? Before either of them could respond, the communication panel chimed with an incoming long-distance call. The display showed Veilthran script that Marcus couldn't read, but Zelia's sudden tension told him everything he needed to. No, grandmother, she whispered. Screen filled with the image of an elderly Veilthran woman whose violet skin had deepened with age to a rich purple, and whose silver markings had expanded into intricate patterns that spoke of centuries of wisdom and experience. Her amber eyes were sharp and penetrating, and her bearing radiated authority. Granddaughter, Elder Thesis said, her voice carrying the formality of official communication. I see you have company. Grandmother, may I present my husband, Marcus Torres, and his brother, Nico Torres. Zelia's voice had taken on a more formal cadence. Marcus, this is Elder Thesa, matriarch of House Nethys. Elder Thesa's gaze fixed on Marcus with unsettling intensity. So, you are the human who bound himself to my granddaughter without proper courtship, without family consultation, without even basic knowledge of our customs. Marcus felt Nico tense beside him, but he kept his voice level. Yes, Elder, I realized the circumstances were unconventional. Unconventional. The word dripped with disdain. Child, do you have any concept of what a life bond means to our people? Do you understand that you have not merely married my granddaughter, but joined yourself to our entire family line? That your actions reflect upon House Nethys across all our territories? I'm learning, Marcus said simply. Every day, Zelia teaches me more about Veilthran culture. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm committed to doing right by her and by your family. Pretty words, Elder Thesa said dismissively. But words are cheap, human. What can you offer my granddaughter? What status? What resources? What future? You work in a cargo bay, living in quarters barely suitable for a single person. Zelia was raised in crystal spires overlooking the sea of mines. She was educated in the finest institutions, trained in diplomacy and trade. What makes you think you are worthy of her? Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Every insecurity he'd harbored about their marriage suddenly seemed validated. What did he have to offer someone like Zelia? What had he been thinking? Grandmother, that is enough, Zelia said sharply, standing up from her chair. You do not speak to my husband that way. Zelia, Marcus began. No, she interrupted, her amber eyes blazing. No, I will not sit here and listen to this. Grandmother, Marcus saved me. When Gavin Moldick cast me aside like refuse, when I sat alone on that dock believing my life was over, Marcus saw something worth saving. He offered me hope when I had none, dignity when I had been stripped of it, and a future when I thought mine was finished. Elder Thesa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her ancient eyes. You ask what he can offer me? Zelia continued. He offers me kindness. He offers me respect. He offers me a partnership built on equality rather than obligation. In 3 weeks, he has shown me more consideration than my previous suitor showed in months of correspondence. You raised me to value honor, grandmother. Marcus Torres is the most honorable man I have ever met. The silence that followed was deafening. Nico looked between Marcus and Zelia with something approaching awe, while Marcus felt his heart race at the fierce defense of their marriage. Finally, Elder Thesa spoke. Granddaughter, step away from the communication device. I wish to speak with your husband privately. Zelia looked like she wanted to argue, but Marcus placed a gentle hand on her arm. It's okay, he said quietly. I can handle this. Once Zelia and Nico had moved to the far side of the room, Elder Thesa leaned forward, her ancient gaze boring into Marcus. That was well done, human. Most would have cowered or become defensive in the face of such criticism. Marcus blinked, confused by the sudden shift in tone. What? I needed to see how you would handle adversity, how you would respond to an attack on your worthiness. More importantly, I needed to see how my granddaughter would respond to your defense. Elder Thesa's expression softened slightly. She has never spoken so passionately about anyone, Marcus Torres. In all her years of courtship and arranged meetings, she has never shown such fire. You were testing us? I was evaluating. There is a difference. Elder Thesa glanced toward where Zelia stood with Nico, clearly straining to hear their conversation. My granddaughter has always been dutiful, always willing to sacrifice her own desires for family honor. That she chose to defend you so fiercely tells me more about your character than any credentials could. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Does this mean I have your blessing? You have my cautious approval, Elder Thesa corrected. Blessing must be earned over time. But I will tell you this, Marcus Torres. Treat my granddaughter well. Continue to show her the respect and kindness she deserves, and you will find House Nethys to be a powerful ally. Disappoint her, and you will discover why our family has maintained its position for centuries. Understood. Good. Now, there are practical matters to discuss. Zalia's father, Varek, will be less diplomatic than I have been. He views this marriage as a slight against his ability to arrange proper matches for his children. You will need to prove yourself to him as well. I'll do whatever it takes. I believe you will try. One more thing. Marcus Torres Zelia mentioned that you work in cargo handling. Is this your chosen profession, or simply what circumstances have provided? Marcus hesitated. I have an engineering background, actually. Military training in systems design and maintenance. But after my discharge, he trailed off, unsure how much to reveal. After your discharge, you found it difficult to obtain positions commensurate with your skills and experience, Elder Thesa finished perceptively. A common story among former military personnel. Perhaps it is time to consider alternatives. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Elder Thesa turned her attention back to Zelia. Granddaughter, return to the communication device. I have something to tell you both. Zelia approached cautiously, as if expecting another confrontation. Yes, grandmother? I have been in contact with the administrators of the Kepler Station Industrial Complex. They are in need of a systems engineering consultant for their new shipping facilities. The position pays well and would allow both of you to relocate to a more suitable living situation. Elder Thesa's eyes fixed on Marcus. The position is yours if you want it, Marcus Torres. Marcus felt his jaw drop. How you arranged this? House Nethes has extensive business relationships throughout this sector. Consider it a wedding gift, though I expect you to prove yourself worthy of the recommendation." "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down. See that you do not. Zelia, I expect regular communications about your well-being and your husband's progress in learning our customs. The family will be watching this union with great interest." After Elder Thissa's image faded from the screen, the room fell silent. Marcus slumped back in his chair, feeling emotionally drained by the entire exchange. "Well," Nico said cheerfully, "that went better than expected. I thought for a minute there she was going to challenge you to single combat or something. She was testing us," Zelia said quietly, settling back into her chair. "Grandmother has always believed that true character is revealed under pressure." "And what do you think?" Marcus asked. "Did we pass?" Zelia reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she had initiated such contact since their marriage. Her skin was warm and soft, and Marcus felt that familiar electric spark at the touch. "I think," she said, her amber eyes meeting his, "that we make a good team. And I think that perhaps it is time we stopped pretending this is merely a practical arrangement." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that somewhere in these past 3 weeks, I have begun to fall in love with my husband. And I hope, that he might be falling in love with me as well." The silence that followed was charged with possibility. Marcus stared into Zelia's eyes, seeing hope and vulnerability and something deeper that took his breath away. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think he is." Nico cleared his throat loudly. "Okay, this is getting adorable, but also really awkward for the single guy in the room. Maybe I should find somewhere else to stay tonight?" "No," Zelia said, though she didn't let go of Marcus's hand. "Family should be here for moments like this. Besides, we have much to discuss. This job opportunity, relocating to Kepler Station, meeting my father. Your father's going to be worse than your grandmother, isn't he?" Marcus asked. Zelia's smile was rueful. "Oh, much worse. But do not worry. We will face him together, as partners, as equals, as husband and wife," Marcus added. "Yes," Zelia agreed, squeezing his hand gently. "As husband and wife," looking at her across the table. This remarkable woman who had chosen to defend him, to trust him, to build a life with him. Marcus felt something settle into place in his chest. Not just contentment, but genuine happiness. For the first time since their marriage, he allowed himself to believe that they might actually make this work. They had 3 more parts of their story to write together, and Marcus found himself eagerly anticipating every chapter.